Hi everyone, welcome to CL-LST. So till now we are done we have done the Contract Act or contract law, which is relevant from our CLAT perspective. Obviously, we haven't dealt with each and every sections of contract law because each and every section is not important from our examination perspective because they don't need us to or they don't want us to know the law in a very detailed manner. But whatever has been the focus of CLAT till now, we have finished it. Now we are moving ahead with constitution. Again, when we take into consideration the constitution, it's a very vast subject. And again, we need not to go and read each and every articles of the constitution. There are few articles which we need to remember for sure. We need to remember the fundamental rights. We need to remember the 12th schedule, which is there in the constitution. Then we need to remember articles which is related to constitutional bodies, amendment, maybe the articles which is dealing with the president, prime minister, judiciary. We need to remember those articles only and not everything in detail. Now, why constitution? So constitution from CLAT perspective is not only relevant from what we are reading in constitution. Constitution is relevant from the current affairs perspective also. Whatever dispute you see, whatever legal issues you see, everywhere the question is whether this is constitutional, whether this is unconstitutional. So basically constitution is the law of the land. And when we say something which is the law of the land, whatever law is there in your country, that particular law has to have some relationship with constitution. It has to be in, you can say, relationship with the constitution. It cannot violate the provision of the constitution. If any of the aspect violates any of the provision of the constitution, then that aspect which violates the provision of the constitution can be declared as unconstitutional. Any issue you pick up the debate with respect to election commissioners appointment. So that is also, election commissioners are a constitutional body, so that is very much relevant. Whenever we take into consideration freedom of speech and expression, these are the fundamental rights given under 191A. And when reasonable restrictions are being imposed, so there also we need to read constitution. When we talk about right to equality, when we talk about right to life, when we talk about pollution free environment, all these are relevant from constitution perspective because it is having some, I mean, article 21 talks about right to life, article 21 talks about the pollution free environment. Similarly, article 14 talks about right to equality. So the idea, what I'm trying to convey over here is constitution is the law of the land, or constitution is the grand norm of a country, or you can say highest authority of the country, and every other law derives its authority from the constitution. So every other law has to follow the provision of constitution, has to be in relationship with constitution. So keeping that in mind, it is very relevant. If you go back and analyze past year's paper, every time you'll see questions from fundamental right, you'll see questions from article 19, and you'll see questions from article 20, you'll see questions from environmental perspective related to or having nexus with article 21. So considering all these things, we have to read the basics of constitution. Again, when we are reading the basics of the constitution, we always have to link it with current affairs, what is happening in our society, from where, like whatever discussions is happening in supreme court, what all important matters court is going to pick up. So from that perspective, we need to focus on constitutional law or constitution. Now, if you have to define constitution, how will you be defining it? So we can say in a layman term that it is a collections of rules and principles whereby a political system is constituted or maybe governed also. Constitution can be written one, constitution can be unwritten one. When we take into consideration Indian constitution, it is it is a written one. Then when we talk about the making of constitution, so it took almost 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days to make the Indian constitution. So all these information is not, maybe we can say, not that important from legal perspective, because now we get the information or the passage or questions in a passage format. But for our understanding perspective, it is very important to know when the constitution came into picture, when it was enforced. All these things you have to understand for your understanding perspective. It is not like for your uh, remembering perspective, because this is something which they don't expect from us. They won't be asking questions from there. So keeping that in mind, now if I say the agenda of the session, so agenda of today's session is this only, that now we will be dealing with constitution, we'll be explaining the constitution. Now, what is the Constitution of India, if we have to say? So, we can say it is the unique thing which is both in the spirit and the content. There are several features, obviously, which has been borrowed from other constitution from all around the world for sure. And even after it is being called as a bag of borrowing, it is, kind of a unique piece of work, because it is covering many things. It is talking about many aspect which is needed from a person's or for the development of a country. So keeping that in mind, we can call it as it's a unique piece of work also. When we take into consideration the constitution have obviously gone through many amendments, and that amendments has brought many changes also. And if we take into consideration the amendment which we have to keep an eye on, so whatever amendment we'll be seeing this year, maybe if there's certain amendments in the constitution, so we'll have to refer to that for sure. Now when we talk about the constitutional law and the constitution, there are certain salient feature of Indian constitution also, and these salient features makes our constitution a unique constitution. This makes our constitution a bulky constitution also. This makes our constitution a comprehensive guidelines, we can say. So when we I mean, before making the present constitution, we can say that the constitution, the framer examined the constitution of various other countries of the world, and also the working of Government Act of 1935, because some of the features has been borrowed from Government Act of 1935. So from there they borrowed many of the provision which was appropriate, which was suitable as per Indian standard. So first and foremost salient feature of Indian constitution can be, it is one of the lengthiest constitution in the world. And when we take into consideration, as I have just stated, constitution can be written one, it can be unwritten one. The Indian constitution is the lengthiest of all written constitution. It is very comprehensive, very elaborative, and covers everything in a detailed manner. Then it is also like in Indian constitution is having a parliamentary form of government. So the constitution opted for the parliamentary system of government rather than going for the presidential system of the government. It is based on the principle of, you can say, cooperation and coordination between the legislature, executive organs. While when we take into consideration the presidential system, it is based on the doctrine of separation of power between the two organs. There is a unique blend of rigid and flexibility. The Constitution of India is neither rigid nor it is very flexible, but it is having the synthesis of both. A rigid constitution is one that requires a special procedure for its amendment, while flexible constitution is one that can be amended in the same manner as the ordinary laws are made. So there are certain provision of our constitution which requires special procedure for changing or amendment. Then there are certain provision which can be amended with the like an ordinary laws also. Then we have fundamental right covered in the part third of the constitution. We have directive principle of state policies, fundamental duties hai. We have a federation with a strong centralization tendency. So always this question pops up, na? Indian constitution is federal in nature, unitary in nature, or quasi federal in nature. So the article 1 of the constitution itself, India, the union. So keeping that in mind, it is the union of state. So the Article 1 says it is unitary in nature, but when we look at the provision, it also reflects that it is federal in nature, and that is why it is called as a quasi-federal in nature, neither unitary nor federal. Then there are concepts of, there's an independent judiciary, and there's a secular state, single citizenship is there. There are separation of powers also. So these are the some of the provisions which makes our constitution or the features of the constitution are sort of salient features. Then before we move ahead with the articles or with the basics of the constitution, which is very much relevant, there are 10 schedule which is given in our constitution, and these 10 schedules are very important. You always need to remember these 10 schedule. You'll always see in news at least one or two three schedule for sure. For example, schedule 10, which is talking about anti-defection, you'll find it in news once, or some other day whenever there's some political thing happening, elections are happening. Schedule 10 comes into picture. So the first schedule talks about the territorial demarcation of states and union territories. Then we have second schedule, which is talking about provision as to president and the governors. Third schedule talks about forms of oath and affirmation. Fifth schedule talks about provision for administration and control of scheduled areas and scheduled tribe areas. Sixth schedule talks about provision for administration of tribal areas in northeastern state. Schedule 5 and Schedule 6 was also very much news in this year. So keeping that in mind, it is very relevant. Then sixth schedule ho gaya. Seventh schedule is talking about the list which is specifying the distribution of subjects between union, state, and the concurrent list also. Eighth schedule talks about the languages which is there in the eighth schedule. The ninth schedule talks about laws and regulations saved from judicial review. So ninth schedule, certain there are certain laws and legislation kept in the ninth schedule which is immune from judiciary, but then after obviously through certain judgments, a timeline has been fixed that if anything is under ninth schedule before this particular timeline, then judiciary will not be interfering in it. But anything is after this timeline, then in that particular case, judiciary does have a right to review. The role of judiciary is to review. Judiciary is the custodian of our constitution. It is the guardian of our constitution. So keeping that in mind, it has to keep a eye. It has to look at laws. It has to review the laws. So keeping that in mind, we have schedule 9. Then as I stated, schedule 10 is talking about disqualifications on the ground of defection, which we always see in news, keeping in mind the elections happening in states, or maybe because of some political issues, or maybe because of the person changing the parties and all. So keeping that in mind, is we always see schedule 10 in news. Then we have schedule 11, which is having the provisions for panchayati raj. Then we have schedule 12, which is having the provisions for urban and local self government. So these are some of the important concepts. Now, the very important, or the first thing which we read in Constitution is the preamble. Preamble is something which indicates the source from which the Constitution came into picture. That is, we, the people of India, have given ourselves the preamble. It was we, the people of India, who selected their representative. These representative went into the formation of constitution. So these representative reflected the ideas what people wanted to have, and that ideas or that aspect or that demand of people have been framed in the form of constitution. So it is always said that we, the people of India, have given ourselves the constitution, and that is why the very first line of preamble says, we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved and to constitute India. So keeping that in mind, it is the authority, the source from where the constitution came into picture is we, the people of India. Although it has not been ratified by the people for sure, it came into force on 26 November 1949. The preamble sets out the aims and aspiration of people, and these has been translated into the various provision of the constitution. That is why preamble is also known as the introduction. Preamble is also known as the mirror of the constitution. It reflects each and every aspect which the framer wanted to have. It reflects what people actually look for in the constitution. So keeping that in mind, it indicates the sources of the constitution. It is the statement of objective of the constitution, you can say. It serves as a challenge to the people to stick to the ideas of the constitution. constitution. It is a kind of sort of introduction to the constitution. There has been issues also where it has been asked or questioned that whether constitution forms is a part of, sorry, preamble is a part of constitution or not. So there are certain cases where Supreme Court has discussed the same, which we will be dealing. And later on, Supreme Court concluded that the Constitution is very much part of the, sorry, preamble is very much part of the Constitution. So keeping that in mind, if we have to say what are the ingredients of the preamble, so preamble give four component: source of authority of the Constitution. It mentions that Constitution derives its power from the people of India. Nature of the Indian state. It says India is a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, and republic state. Objective of the Constitution. It gives the objective as a justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. And the date of adoption, or the date of coming the Constitution coming into force, is 26th November 1949. Now, when we take into consideration the Constitution, so there are certain words which wasn't there initially in the preamble. It has been added by 42nd constitutional amendment. So the word socialist, the word secular, and the word integrity, three word which is written over here in italics, wasn't there earlier. These three words has been added under the 42nd constitutional amendment. So if we look at the slide, it says preamble states that people of India adopt the constitution on 26 November 1949 in their constituent assembly with the purpose of forming India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens social, economic, and political justice, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and opportunity, fraternity of all, and ensuring the dignity of individual. And the last thing which the preamble is stating is unity and integrity of the nation. So before I go and explain this provision of the constitution, I'll be taking up this in next class. But before that, I want you guys to come prepared or to read what do you understand by sovereignty, what do you understand by socialist, what do you understand by secular, what do you understand by democratic republic, then what is justice according to you, what is liberty according to you, what is equality according to you, what is fraternity according to you, and at last what we want to achieve, unity and integrity of the nation. So read this preamble in detail, try to understand each and every term. What is sovereignty, for example? So India is sovereign, in its authority. That means India has complete control on its internal matter and external matter. Nobody shall be interfering in the internal or external matters of India. So that is what is sovereignty. I'm just giving you a basic idea. I want you guys to come prepared from this perspective. So from today onwards, for next few classes, we would be dealing with constitution. We'll be understanding the fundamental rights also. We'll be also understanding the different types of rights. We'll be also understanding basic concept from judiciary perspective, and we'll be linking it with current affairs, that okay, these topics are there and these are the issues which is there or pending before the Supreme Court, and how it is relevant from our examination perspective. So that's all for today's class, guys. See you guys in the next class, and whatever questions you have, you can post it in chat box so that we'll take it in the next class. So thank you, guys.